There is an old saying in the landscaping business that I think about every single day. The grass is always greener on the other side because it's fertilized with bullshit. People look over the fence and they see the vibrant green color. They see the manicured edges and the perfection, but they don't see the water bill. They don't see the chemicals required to keep it that way. And they certainly don't see the rot taking hold just beneath the soil. My wife was a grass gazer. She spent our entire 7-year marriage looking over the fence. She looked at her friends' husbands, men who wore suits and leased luxury cars. And then she looked at me. Me, I don't wear suits. I wear heavy work boots and canvas pants that are usually stained with hydraulic fluid or red clay. I don't lease luxury cars. I own a fleet of heavy-duty dump trucks. I own a site preparation company, and we do large-scale commercial land clearing. It's dirty work, it's loud work, and it is incredibly profitable work. But my wife never cared about the profit. She only cared about the presentation. She wanted the aesthetic. She wanted the husband who could take her to brunch on a Tuesday morning. She didn't want the husband who was up at 4:30 a.m. bidding on a multi-million-dollar municipal drainage contract. She thought she deserved better. She thought she deserved greener grass. And eventually, she found a patch of grass that looked perfect. He was everything I wasn't. He was polished. He was available. He lived in a high-rise penthouse that overlooked the city. My wife thought she was trading up. She thought she was leaving a workhorse for a show pony. But she made one fatal calculation error. She forgot to check the deed to see who owned that patch of green grass she was so desperate to run to. She moved out on a Monday, thinking she had won. She didn't know that on Tuesday morning, the sheriff was coming to pay her boyfriend a visit, and she certainly didn't know that the man signing the eviction paperwork was me. Let me tell you how I legally destroyed my wife's fantasy in less than 24 hours. To understand how the trap worked, you must understand the business. I'm a dirt guy. In construction, there are the glamour guys like the architects and the realtors who get their photos in the magazines. Then there are the dirt guys. We are the ones who come in first. We clear the trees, we grade the land, we install the sewer lines, and we pour the concrete pads. Without us, the pretty building falls. I built my company from one truck and a used skid steer. Now, I have 30 employees and contracts all over the tri-state area. I worked hard. I mean, bone-deep, tired hard. For the first 5 years of our marriage, I worked 6 days a week. My wife knew this when she married me. She liked the security. She liked that the bills were always on auto pay. She liked that when her car needed new tires, they just magically appeared. But about 2 years ago, the dynamic shifted in a way I didn't catch until it was too late. I landed a massive contract for a new distribution center. It was a career-defining job, but it required me to be on-site constantly for 6 months. That's when my wife got bored. And a bored wife with a credit card and no hobbies is a dangerous combination. She started spending time at an exclusive social club downtown. It charges an exorbitant monthly fee just to walk in the door. I paid the dues because I thought it made her happy. I thought she was making friends. She was making friends, all right. She started talking about this new guy almost immediately. She would tell me over dinner that he was in venture capital. She would tell me that he says the market is shifting to crypto. She would tell me that he thinks manual labor is a dying industry. I would just shake my head and ask her to pass the salt. I wasn't jealous at first. I was just tired. I assumed this guy was just some blowhard she met at the bar who liked to hear himself talk. But then the comparison started. She started asking why we never went on exotic vacations, because apparently he traveled constantly. I told her I had a business to run and it was the busy season. She recited lines that sounded like they came from a motivational poster, telling me that I needed an abundance mindset like him. I didn't know it then. but his abundance mindset was about to be exposed as a fraud. I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but I am a detail-oriented man. You can't run a multi-million-dollar construction firm if you aren't obsessed with the details. I noticed the small changes first. My wife stopped complaining about my dirty boots. In fact, she stopped talking to me almost entirely. She changed her phone password. She started taking her phone into the bathroom when she would take a shower. Classic signs. Cheating 101. But I didn't hire a private investigator because I didn't need to. In my line of work, we use GPS tracking on everything. Every truck, every excavator, and every generator has a tracker on it, so we know if equipment is being stolen. My wife drove a luxury SUV that was registered to my company as a tax write-off. Because it was a company vehicle, it had a discrete fleet tracker installed under the dashboard. I didn't check it often, but one Tuesday, she said she was going to her mother's house for a girls' wine night with her sister. I pulled up the fleet tracking app on my iPad while I was watching a football game. The little green dot representing her car was not at her mother's house. It was downtown. It was parked at a building known for being the most expensive address in the city. It was a luxury high-rise apartment complex. It was the kind of place where people pay thousands for a one-bedroom just so they can press a button in an elevator. The car sat there from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. Then it drove home. When she walked through the door, she lied to my face about where she had been. I didn't call her out yet. I am a builder. I don't start demolition until the permits are approved. I needed to see the structural integrity of this affair before I brought the wrecking ball. For the next month, I monitored the situation. I researched him. It wasn't hard because guys like him love to leave a digital footprint. He was 38 years old. He claimed to be an angel investor and lifestyle entrepreneur. His social media was a shrine to narcissism. He posted photos leaning against cars that weren't his and wearing watches that looked like rentals. But I dug deeper. I have a subscription to a professional background check service that we use to vet potential employees. I ran his name. The report that came back was enlightening. He had 3 civil judgments against him, 2 of which were from previous landlords. His employment was listed as self-employed, and his current address was the Penthouse unit at that luxury building downtown. But here was the kicker. That building is owned by a large real estate conglomerate. I knew the owners because I had done the site prep for 3 of their shopping centers. I called the VP of operations, a guy I had known for years. I asked him how the building was doing. He laughed and told me it was a headache. He said the previous management company let in a bunch of tenants who stopped paying rent the second the economy turned. Then he dropped the bombshell that gave me the keys to my revenge. He told me specifically that they had a guy in the penthouse who hadn't paid a dime in 4 months. He said they filed for eviction 60 days ago, got the judgment, and were just waiting on the sheriff to schedule the lockout. My heart stopped. Then it started beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. The boyfriend was being evicted. He hadn't paid rent in 4 months. He was broke. He was squatting, and my wife had no clue. He was playing her. He was probably telling her he owned the place. He was probably looking for a new roommate to help him float the bills, or he was just enjoying the ride until the sheriff showed up. And that gave me an idea, a terrible, wonderful idea. I looked at the calendar. It was the middle of October. I asked the VP if he wanted to offload the bad debt on that unit. He asked me why I would want to buy a deadbeat tenant. I told him I had a personal interest in the rehabilitation of the property. I wired the funds that afternoon. I paid off the arrears, which was a significant amount, and had the judgment assigned to my holding company. I effectively owned that apartment, or rather, I owned the right to kick him out of it. I called the sheriff's civil division the next day. They told me they had a slot opening up on November 14th at 9 a.m. I told them to book it. That was 3 weeks away. I had exactly 21 days to push my wife toward the edge so she would fall right into the trap. Now I had a date, November 14th. That was the day the hammer was going to drop, but I had a problem. I had to get my wife to move out of my house and into his apartment before the 14th. If she was still living with me when the sheriff kicked him out, she would just stay put. She would cry. She would say she was manipulated by him, and she would try to cling to me again. I didn't want that. I wanted her gone. I wanted her to feel the concrete hit her face when the safety net disappeared. So I started to make life uncomfortable. I decided to stop being the ATM machine she fell in love with. If she wanted to live an abundance mindset lifestyle with him, she could start paying for it. On October 20th, my wife went to the spa. She texted me in a panic because the card was declined. I didn't check the balance because I knew the balance was zero. I had reported the card lost and requested a new one with the new number sent to my office. I lied to her and said business was tight. I told her I had cash flow issues and had to freeze some credit lines to make payroll. This was a lie, as my business had just cleared a massive profit for the quarter. When she demanded I fix it so she could buy a dress for a charity gala, I told her we weren't going. I told her the tickets were too expensive and it wasn't in the budget. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. She told me the club expected us to be there. I told her they expected her to be there, but I was just the guy who wrote the check. She stormed out of the room. For the next 2 weeks, I tightened the screws. I canceled the landscapers, the cleaning service, and the cable package. I turned the thermostat down to save on heating. I made our comfortable, frictionless life feel jagged and cold. And just as I suspected, she took the bait. She ran straight to him. A few occasions, I hid voice recorders in the house, and just as I suspected, she was telling him how uncomfortable it became in the house, and he was telling her exactly what she wanted to hear. He told her to leave me and come and stay with him because his investments were about to pay off. He was lying, of course. He just needed her credit card to buy groceries. He didn't know the eviction was coming. He probably thought he could stall the management company for another month if he showed them he had a roommate contributing to the household. It was a game of chicken, and they were both blindfolded. November 10th, 4 days before D-Day. The atmosphere in my house was toxic. My wife wouldn't look at me. I decided to push her off the ledge. I came home early on Friday afternoon and sat her down at the kitchen table. I told her the business was in real trouble, and I thought we might have to sell the house. Her eyes got wide. I told her we would have to downsize to a small apartment. I saw the panic in her eyes. A small apartment with a broke husband was her nightmare. She stood up and told me she wasn't going down with the ship. She told me she wanted a divorce. There it was, the magic words. I tried to look crushed. I asked if there was someone else, knowing damn well there was. She deflected, saying we wanted different things because I wanted to be small and she wanted more. She told me she was moving out on Monday to stay with a friend. When I asked if it was him, she didn't deny it. She said he had a place at the luxury tower. He had space for her, and he had a future. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. I told her if that was what she wanted, I wouldn't stop her. She looked relieved. She thought she was escaping a sinking ship, but she had no idea she was jumping onto a life raft that was already on fire. The weekend was a blur of boxes. She packed everything that wasn't nailed down. She even took the expensive vacuum cleaner. I let her take it because I figured she would need it to clean up the mess she was about to step into. On Monday morning, November 13th, a moving truck arrived. Her boyfriend wasn't there to help her. Of course he wasn't. He was too busy pretending to work. I stood on the porch and drank my coffee while she loaded her life into the back of that truck. She looked at me one last time before she got into her car. She told me I was a good man, but I was just limited. I told her I hoped she found happiness, and I meant it. I hoped she found exactly the amount of happiness she deserved. She drove away straight to the apartment building. By now, she's probably moved her boxes into the penthouse unit. She probably stood on the balcony, looking out over the city, thinking she had finally made it. She went to sleep that night in the arms of her rich boyfriend. She felt safe. She felt superior. She felt like she had upgraded. But the clock was already ticking down the final hours of her fantasy. She didn't know that I had the sheriff on speed dial. She didn't know that the alarm was set for 9 a.m. the next morning. And she certainly didn't know that the landlord wasn't the real estate conglomerate anymore. The landlord was my company, and the landlord was coming to collect. On November 14th, I woke up at 6 a.m. I didn't put on a suit. I put on my work boots. I put on my heavy canvas work pants. I put on a high visibility yellow vest. I wanted to look like exactly what she hated. I wanted to look like the help. I drove to the sheriff's office to meet the deputy. He asked if I had the paperwork. I handed him the folder containing the writ of possession and the legal assignment of judgment. I told him I was the locksmith and showed him my drill. We drove to the building in a convoy. We took the elevator up to the penthouse floor. The ride took 45 seconds, and I counted every single one of them. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was the payoff. This was the moment the grass turned brown. We stepped out into the hallway and approached the door. I could hear music playing inside. It was 9:15 a.m. The deputy didn't ring the doorbell. He pounded on the wood with his fist and announced it was a sheriff's department eviction. The music stopped instantly. I heard shuffling inside and a muted argument. Then the lock clicked and the door swung open. It wasn't the boyfriend who opened it. It was my wife. She was wearing a silk robe that I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. She looked confused. Then she saw me standing behind the sheriff in my neon yellow vest. Her face didn't just go pale, it went transparent. She whispered my name. I wished her a good morning and told her I was there to mow the lawn. Her boyfriend appeared behind her, looking barely awake. He demanded to know what was going on. The deputy stepped forward and informed him he was executing a writ of possession for non-payment of rent. He told them they had 10 minutes to gather essential items before being removed. The boyfriend's face turned gray. He tried to argue that it was a mistake and that he had spoken to the management company. I stepped around the sheriff and delivered the line I had been rehearsing for 3 weeks. I told him that the management company didn't own the judgment anymore. I told him I did. My wife looked at me, then at him, and told him I was her husband. He started shouting, accusing her of lying because she said I was a broke construction worker. I adjusted my safety vest and told him I was a construction worker, but I wasn't broke and I wasn't stupid. I held up the paperwork and explained that I bought his debt. I told him I was the one deciding whether to give him an extension. When he asked if I would, I smiled and told him I was denying it. I told him he had 9 minutes left. Then my wife started screaming at the sheriff. She claimed nobody told them. The sheriff pointed to the door frame. He told her his deputy had posted the bright orange 48-hour notice to vacate right there on Sunday morning. My wife whipped her head around to look at her boyfriend. She asked him if he saw it, since she was packing on Sunday. He crumbled. He started stuttering, admitting he saw it, but tore it down so she wouldn't worry. This is the part where the greener grass usually turns brown, but in this case, it just died instantly. He didn't try to protect her. He turned on her like a cornered rat. He yelled at the sheriff, trying to claim that because she lived there too, she had rights. He was trying to use my wife as a human shield to delay the process. I shook my head and corrected him. I explained that she wasn't on the lease or the deed, which legally made her just a guest, and since the leaseholder was being removed, the guest had to go too. My wife looked at him, realizing he was blaming her. She screamed at him that he told her he owned the place. He screamed back at her that she said I was a pushover who would fund their lifestyle. I laughed a deep belly laugh that echoed in the hallway. I told the sheriff to get them out. The next hour was a masterclass in humiliation. Because this was a sheriff set-out, my crew was allowed to remove the furniture. I radioed down to the lobby and had 4 of my biggest guys come up. They walked into the penthouse and started clearing it out. They picked up the fake luxury furniture and marched it out the door. And then they got to the boxes, my wife's boxes, the boxes she had packed with such hope only 24 hours ago. She was standing in the hallway, clutching her jewelry box and begging me not to put her stuff on the street because it was going to rain. I looked at the weather app and confirmed there was a 60% chance of showers. I told her she better hurry downstairs. She sobbed and asked where she was supposed to go. I pointed to her boyfriend, who was arguing with the sheriff about his sneakers, and told her she had him. She pleaded with me, saying she made a mistake and that she loved me. I looked her in the eye and told her she wasn't lost. She was calculating. I told her she just forgot to carry the one. I turned my back on her. I walked back into the empty apartment and watched from the balcony as my crew stacked her designer bags on the dirty city sidewalk. I watched as the greener grass turned into a pile of wet cardboard on the side of the road. My wife tried to come back that night. She showed up at my house and tried to use her key, but it didn't work. I had rekeyed the locks the second she drove away on Monday. She banged on the door, claiming it was marital property. I spoke to her through the doorbell camera. I told her she had abandoned the property and established residence elsewhere. I told her to go away or I would call the police for trespassing. I don't know where she got the money from, but she had enough to sleep in a hotel. The divorce was brutal but short. She tried to ask for alimony and half the business, but I had one final card to play in court that ensured she walked away with nothing. I had the evidence files. I had the GPS data, the voice recordings, and the financial records of her spending on the joint account while she was planning to leave. In our state, dissipation of marital assets is a serious issue. Spending my money to plan a life with another man didn't sit well with the judge. The judge called her conduct egregious. She got nothing from the business. She got no alimony. She got to keep her car, which she couldn't afford the insurance on, and her jewelry. That was it. 7 years of marriage dissolved in 20 minutes. It's been 6 months. I kept the contract for the building. The boyfriend declared bankruptcy and moved back to his parents' house in another state. His empire turned out to be a few $100s in a trading app. And my ex-wife, I haven't seen or heard from her since the divorce. Don't know where she is. This woman had a garden that was lush and green because I took care of it, but she didn't want to water it. She wanted to jump the fence to a plastic lawn because it looked shinier. Most of the time, the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it, and I'm never wasting a drop on her again.